Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
Position power is not what you should be leaning on. You should be leaning on adding value.
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Nanad and I are really excited to welcome a true legend from the logistics space, Tom Schmitt. Tom, a seasoned executive with a rich history of transformative leadership, has left a permanent mark on the logistics and supply chain industry. His most recent role as president, chairman, and CEO at Forward Air Corporation saw him steering a $2 billion premium expedited ground transportation company listed on Nasdaq for 25 years. Tom's multifaceted career spans additional executive roles at Purolator, FedEx, McKinsey & Company, British Petroleum, and several board directorships. He's also an active investor in innovative businesses, reflecting his commitment to fostering growth and excellence. Tom is a published author, co-authoring Simple Solutions, and a sought-after speaker at CEO-level conferences worldwide. Educated at Harvard Business School and the European School of Business, Tom brings a unique blend of strategic acumen, operational expertise, and a passion for sustainable growth to every role. Tom, absolute pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome to the show.
Dan and Ninad, just happy and fortunate to be with you guys. And thank you for the very, very kind words of the introduction. I was very fortunate to have been with a lot of great teams and a lot of great people over the last decades.
I mean, I got to say, the one word that catches on is like straight up legend. Almost any one of your roles over the last decade, 2 decades, right, would be the highlight of one individual's entire career while you have been able to go through in roles and, personally, being connected to FedEx and spend time there and knowing that you led that. And, we got friends at Forward Air and knowing like how well respected the company happens to be and you're under your leadership, the progress that it made. And then for me, something close to my heart is definitely as a Canadian, being the leader of Purolator, one of the most iconic Canadian brands as far as, logistics space is concerned. So I have to say, probably one of the most high profile individual, but grounded in reality. And I just want to give this insight to the audience before we get in, right? We spoke to Tom yesterday just to prep and plan, be like, okay, how are we going to do this? We could have just pressed record at that moment because the amount of insights and leadership that came out of that. And even before starting this podcast, we were just talking about it for 5 minutes. That was amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Let's get going.
Yeah, awesome, Tom. Okay. So we'd love to kick things off by hearing from you where this all began. Your immigration story from Germany to leading some of these, some of the most recognizable companies in North America is a fascinating journey and story. So we'd love from you to share that story with the audience.
Yeah, Dan. And you actually gave a secret away. I always start conversations with, yes, I'm Tom. I'm from the deep South. Then I pause. and then I add of Germany. Because obviously you people will pick up. I may have lived 22 years actually in Atlanta and Memphis together, which is close to the deep South. But I was born in a small town in southern Germany, close to Austria. I want to give you a little bit of like how I came to America, but I also want some important life lessons for me on that journey. The first one is my parents never really left a radius of 40, 50 miles. But what I got from them is 2 things. One is just good down-to-earth values, like literally treat every single individual the same. And that's a huge deal. And I can honestly say that I strive, whether it's someone doing a frontline job, or whether it's the chairman of the board, I strive to act exactly the same way with everybody that we interact with. The second thing, they actually gave me a lot of confidence. And what I mean by that is I grew up in the 70s and I listened to Casey Kasem's Top 40. And for those who have, I guess you guys might qualify. For those of us who are a bit older, this is kind of the keep your feet on the ground and reach for the stars kind of motto. And that was my impetus. Like, I do need to be there. I want to be part of that type of a culture, like reach for the stars. My teenagers' parents were still Second World War generation. And you were more in the mode of like, just look down, don't cheer too much, and just make sure you keep everything kind of very, very level, because it's just after having gone through and lost the Second World War, which Germany caused, there was a lot of kind of somberness. But I liked the here's 3 ways to get something done versus here's 3 reasons why something cannot be done, kind of American attitude that I picked up from Casey Kasem. So after high school, I was an analytical and academic nerd. So I had the mathematically perfect high school graduation score. I was trying to make my way to America. So I found this international business program where you actually start the first 2 years in your home country, and then you do 2 years in either France or England at that time. And I actually went to England, thought, okay, that's not quite America, but it's at least one step closer. And so I finished my undergrad studies in London, and then I joined British Petroleum. But this was my way to follow my heart and let me go one step closer to living my American dream. And I finished in London, joined British Petroleum, and had another tremendously important life lesson to me. The gentleman who, after an internship at British Petroleum, offered me a permanent job after my graduation was the head of all retail at BP globally, and he was American, Hugh Hanna. And he said, like, we would like to make you an offer to join us full time when you're done after 1 more year in London. And I said, I'm honored to get that offer. I will accept that offer. I'm having one ask of you. When I start and when you go back to America, you take me with you. The guy just looked at me like, okay, we'll do that. And so I started a year later at BP in London. And 3 months later, Hugh Hanna, head of all BP retail globally, stops by at my cubicle and says, Tom, I'm about to go back to the States. And I promised you last year in your internship to take you with me when I go back. And he did. So a few weeks later, so this is about commitment and keeping commitments. And I remember that he didn't have to do that. I mean, like, so, and there was no contractual obligation, but he did. And that just burned into my heart and in my brain. Like, when you make commitments, you do everything possible to keep those commitments. So I went to America. I actually got from global retail analysis in London to managing 17 retail gas stations in Metro Cleveland, which was an amazing management experience. Like, there's people like, who is this kid with this German accent, like telling us what to do here? And the one thing that you also learned there is like position power is not really relevant. It is about, can I do anything to add value to what these seasoned station managers can do so that they respect me? And I really tried hard to figure out, can I help them with pricing? Like, if the gas station across the street changes its prices, can I always drive around, make sure that we follow when we need to? Can I do something about inventory control? Just things where I feel like I'm starting to earn these people's respect. Position power is not what you should be leaning on. You should be leaning on adding value. And so that was my management frontline experience, and it was wonderful. And I got a chance to actually join one of the best consulting firms on earth, McKinsey. My girlfriend at the time, she was out after college in London, same college degree that I had. She was joining Boston Consulting Group. And so, and I said like, and she said like, I can't follow you in America. She was in Germany. I don't have a work permit. Can you come back to Germany? And I said like, well, your consulting thing sounds really interesting. Who's the best firm in that field? And she said like, well, we would say Boston Consulting Group, but there's this other company called McKinsey. And so I said, okay, let me just write a handwritten letter to the guy who runs that place in Germany that I need to work for them because I need to come back to Germany. And he runs the best shop in this field. And they actually invited me to interview. I interviewed, started in the German office, actually in their brand new office in Vienna, which was part of the German office complex. And then a year later, made it to Harvard Business School and learned a ton there. After Harvard Business School, I went back to McKinsey. McKinsey had a program where they actually paid me through business school, a wonderful opportunity. And then because I always wanted to be in America, I stayed in Atlanta. When I was with McKinsey, it just happened to be 31 years ago, my first clients happened to be in the transportation space. And so I did 5 years worth of transportation consulting for railroads, for parcel companies, for pallet companies, for forwarders. And then FedEx knocked at my door, and I got the great opportunity to work with the Memphis-based FedEx team for 12 years. It was a great opportunity and a city with lots of character, lots of grit. Then 5 years after I started leading FedEx Supply Chain, one of the operating companies, I got, as you mentioned, the opportunity to run a whole company. And to your point, Purolator is not exactly a super well-known brand name outside Canada, but it's a wonderful, as you said, iconic institution. And every small kid in Canada obviously knows Purolator because there's thousands and thousands of Purolator trucks. There's planes that say Purolator on them, and you get your parcel and you get your Christmas gift, and there's huge deliveries to food banks. Purolator does a tremendous job supporting Canadians that actually need some help and need some food.
Absolutely.
So, this was an amazing time. And a few years later, I had the opportunity to go back home to my first home, Germany, for a few years on the management board of a company called DB Schenker. But I learned a lot. I learned with McKinsey that it's great to expand options early. McKinsey's like great overall apprenticeship. And you're early in your career, it's good to do things that are option expanding. Consulting is option expanding because you can go anywhere afterwards, right? Then with FedEx, people, service, profit, you have FedEx background. It always stuck with me. You are focused on supporting and making your own people successful, do everything to stretch them will-wise, skill-wise, then they will in turn do an amazing job providing exceptional service, and profit is almost a logical consequence. People, service, profit in that priority order and sequence. That stuck with me for a long time. Then going home to DB Schenker was just the Germany that I got home to in 2015 to me felt more open-minded, more inclusive, and frankly also more positive. The Soccer World Cup in 2006 that Germany hosted did a great job of it's actually okay to cheer for your home team. It's actually okay to high-five each other when there's success. And that, I think, was a breakthrough for the mentality of Germans saying, yes, everybody in the world is equally important and the same, but it's okay to cheer for your home team. And so I was fortunate to have 3 years with DB Schenker where I was back home, and then Forward Air got me to my adopted home of America. I'm a proud American citizen, and I'm very, very fortunate to be here. And for the last 5.5 years, I served Forward Air.
Such an amazing journey. And as you are talking through it, I can see the threads kind of connecting as well. The way you went through the journey, or probably one of the best ways someone's actually explained their own journey down to the roots, that German upbringing, that particular perspective of working hard, right? And looking at the positive side of things. I think that in itself, then driving into, your educational journey, but the BP part, right? Something you said, right? When you came to Cleveland, it's how do I add value to these seasoned operators? I used to be one of the seasoned operators in a British Petroleum pump in Philadelphia back in 2012. And I would look at district managers and go, okay, as if you know what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So I didn't read that part that that's exactly what you did at BP. So I know exactly what you are talking about, and I can see being able to understand that. The other thing, I think after this podcast, many people will write to McKinsey partners and BCG partners to say, hey, can I get an interview? I don't think that's how it works anymore, guys. Tom got really lucky back in the days, just saying.
Took the initiative, right? He made it happen.
One of my bosses at FedEx, Mike Glenn, one of the things he liked saying is luck, because I was lucky when I got that interview at McKinsey Germany. But he said luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. it happened to be McKinsey in Germany was growing. There was job opportunity, but luck happens because I was prepared to do something. I did something unusual. I got this guy's address and wrote a very, very kind of sincere, heartfelt, handwritten letter, right? So this is not a ton of work, but you had to be prepared. There had to be an opportunity, and then luck meant the two of those things, preparedness and opportunity, coming together at the same time.
That is so beautiful. And I do want to touch on the part where you brought up PSP, right? The people, service, profit part of it. And I think in a broader sense, from a leadership perspective, Tom, my observation building a small company today, right? Even when I was at FedEx, right? Like when you embody yourself into a philosophy, a culture of that nature to drive that type of value, FedEx did such a phenomenal job at actually explaining what it means and have that embodied in every single individual in the organization to create a sense of, I want to use the word family, right? Like what is the purpose of what we are doing, right? Like, so, and driving to that. And building a small company, I have to say, culture is such an important part that a lot of people don't understand. Just having a good solution, good product doesn't cut it. At the end of the day, it's going to be its own organism, right? And how do you actually create that value is by embodying what you say in culture, documenting it, and then communicating, and not be some poster on the wall. Actually mean it, right?
Nat, let me just stop because you talked about this family and you've talked about this purpose. Here's a story that actually, when I told it before, when I tell it, it almost said like, Tom, you're making this up. Actually, I'm not making this up. This actually happened this way. So with FedEx, one of our very well-established customer relationships was with a company called Medtronic, a Minneapolis-based company, pacemakers, stents. And I
helped with their warehouse. Oh. Yes.
And I was personally very engaged in that relationship. So I went up to their head office in Minneapolis several times. And then when you walk in there, there's actually this clock in the atrium that actually counts down kind of every, like how many lives Medtronic helped save. And so I go up there 5-6 times over a multi-year period, and happened to be 3 or 4 times the same gentleman happened to sweep the floors in the atrium. But he was always whistling, always like looking at people coming in with a like bright smile and like, good morning, and how are you doing? And so, and then he kept on sweeping. And so I ran into this gentleman actually in the bathroom, the 4th or 5th time. So like, can you just, tell me like, how do you actually get that energy like that? Like I've seen you now 4 or 5 times here, and you're like just always positive, upbeat, and full of energy. And he said like, well, that's easy. I mean, we're Medtronic. We're saving a life every 3 seconds. And the guy did not say, well, it's kind of a tough job. I'm sweeping the floors in the atrium and in the bathrooms. The guy said like, oh, that's easy. Like, and this goes back to your pointing out about purpose, right? Like at Forward Air, we could have said like, well, we're moving trucks across the country. Well, we could also say we're making livelihoods possible. We're making lives easier and better, right? Because we get things exactly to where they need to be, exactly within the time window, and they're going to be intact shipments. So, and that enables commerce. The same thing Fred Smith globally enabled by saying we can actually run planes back and forth domestically in the US and globally that don't have the 3 of us sitting in them. They actually, all they do is make commerce possible and change what's possible without that invention. So, but I found it so impressive that I ran into a absolute frontline person who fully lived in his mind that spirit of there's a deeper purpose here. Yes, I sweep the floors, but most importantly, we save a life every 3 seconds.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
Meaningful.
So, Tom, behind you, for those that are watching on YouTube, there is a poster board of something called the Tomisms. And I think it's probably a combination of learnings, lessons learned over your career. but wanted to, I've been hearing more and more about the Thomism. So I'd love to hear like where they came from, what they, how they've influenced your leadership philosophy. And if you have any top favorites that you'd like to share with the audience.
Yeah. So I'd give, my wife, Anita, and then also a marketing VP, a wonderful professional leader, Sylvia Sintron at Forward Air, some credit. So I was at Forward Air for 5.5 years, and I did a lot of, you mentioned before, public engagements, like in speaking, and on behalf of Forward Air, and sometimes at industry conferences. And then both Sylvia and my wife just started writing down kind of, okay, he keeps saying these things like when given the opportunity, people choose to be confused is one of them, right? Like there's so much to be said about clarity of articulation, because it also represents clarity of thinking, but it also represents sometimes courage. When we have to manage costs down, and this might actually mean there's going to be people that will lose their jobs, you can talk around it, and we need to kind of tighten our belts, and then people have been given, by me being less than clear, the opportunity to want to hear what they want to hear. Like, no, I think my job's safe. I think I'm okay. And then people choose to be confused. So one of my Thomism favorites is like, don't give those people that opportunity. But because when given the opportunity, people choose to be confused because they don't want to hear what they really probably need to be hearing. And part of it is lack of courage by the speaker. There's one that actually I also like, which is you need to be compelling, not complete. And I think this is, if you think about it, when you make an argument, sometimes people keep going on and on and on. And this is where also another one comes in. When things get longer, they don't get better. So, and you need to be compelling, not complete. Another one is we're not a philosophy club. And then, because, I mean, like we're FedEx, Purolator, right? And most of our listeners' businesses, I mean, they're high volume, high transaction businesses. When you know directionally where to go, you need to move, right? One of our leadership imperatives at Forward Air was we don't wait. And we oftentimes refer back to that and say like, well, we said we don't wait. Let's move. Let's go and do something. So some of these, they have become ways to remind myself. I'm far from perfect, but to strive to kind of live those types of things. Keep the main thing, right? Don't get lost in 5 different things. Keep the main thing. So there are certain ones that we just remind each other about kind of what's job number one. The first one is a question that's what would have to be true. And that's actually a question that I also used in the book Simple Solutions that I was fortunate enough to co-author. And Fred Schmitt actually was kind enough to write the foreword, the founder of FedEx, to that book. What would have to be true? So when you sit and you say like, well, we do need to double or triple the Canadian business. Well, that's not possible. We can look for 5% growth. Well, then can we do an exercise here? What would have to be true for us to double this business within 18 months? Well, it's not possible. Like, can we just put a pen to paper and write down we would have to hire 30% more salespeople. We'd have to make sure that the value proposition gets positioned to the target customer set in face-to-face whatever that is, right? You just start right. What would have to be true for us to double that business? And then you write these things down. And then you say like, well, can we somehow rally behind making these conditions a remarkable reality? Because then we actually will be doubling that business. What would have to be true and this gets you beyond incrementalism and gets you to a remarkable reality that by just looking for the next 3 or 5% increase, you would never get to. We had one example at FedEx where every third or fourth, this was one bad year, but every third or fourth incentive compensation check that a sales professional received was actually incorrect. So when you got your incentive check at the end of the month, it wasn't correct, and it always got adjusted afterwards, but it's obviously highly demotivating when this thing is very likely not to be correct. And then for the objectives for the following year, I saw a draft saying we need to get these incorrect compensation checks down by 10%. And that's when I said, sorry guys, this doesn't work. So can we just do this exercise here? What would have to be true for every single one of those incentive compensation checks to be correct? And then you start listing those conditions and can we tackle that? Sure enough, a year later, we didn't quite get there, but we got fairly close to having all correct compensation checks. And that's a type of a way to just think about step change versus incrementalism. What would have to be true for that to become a reality? And then you list those things, and then you figure out to get those things done. And you will be amazed how remarkable close you get. Last one that I want to point out, and then I'm going to be quiet for a moment. So this one's actually not mine. And by the way, there's probably 5 or 6 of those Thomas's that I heard from somebody and I was impressed, and I just kind of made it my own. So this one is definitely not mine. This is leave a place better than you found it. That's a Boy Scout saying. And to me, this is something I strive every single day to live. Oftentimes when you go to somebody's funeral, then there's a eulogy, and then someone will say very kind things about the person who just passed away, and that they left this place, their hometown, their family, better than they found it. And I think that's a tremendous ambition and aspiration. Hopefully that's the case for many of us when we get to graduate from this earth. I think we should actually adopt leaving a place better than you found it every single day, not at the end of a lifetime. How do you do that? Well, so any one of us, we get 10, 50, 100 emails a day. We have 6 in-person meetings. We have 10 phone calls. Every single one of those is an opportunity to either hit a delete button or say, actually, Ninad, I didn't have that experience, but I'm copying Dan in because I believe he went through the same issue you're going through, and he may be able to give you some tips. And this is a 30-second difference between hitting a delete button because we're all tired or choosing to actually connect and leaving this email exchange, leaving you better than I found you before because actually I made the effort of making that connection. I can do the same thing in a project meeting. Did I leave this project meeting with 2 actionable consequences that were not in place before the meeting? So you can leave an interaction via email, you can leave a conversation, you can leave the counterpart, you can leave people in a project meeting better than they were before. And again, we don't have to wait until our funeral. We can actually making these leaving a place better than you found it aspiration a remarkable reality tens and tens of times every single day.
And a lot of these things, right? It's so beautiful. These are also hard to do, as simple as they are, right? Like leave a place better than you found it, right? Like you mentioned like that. It also came down to like, I was reflecting on myself from a time management perspective, right? And then I look at what you have achieved, right? Like the ability to say, I am going to keep moving forward. And it connects directly to time management because this is a challenge that I personally go through myself. Like I almost feel like I just don't have enough time in my day. And then I look at someone like you with everything that you have achieved and you have been able to achieve it, right? Like, so it is about, okay, I might not be the best person for this, but how do I keep moving it forward? How do I and picking and choosing what's best for you, where you can actually change, and the other change can come through the people that you surround yourself with. And there is a deep lesson of learning for a lot of people in that, like specifically myself, I'll be very honest. So that's beautiful.
It does. I mean, there's something about discipline, right? And there's something, because you're right. I mean, there's a certain effort behind it, right? I mean, like, again, when you're tired at the end of the day and you're still looking at this 39 unopened emails, it's tempting to hit the delete button a number of times versus going through that effort of like, actually, no, Dan had that same issue. Let me just reconnect those two. Or let me make the own effort of like, here's my take on this topic. And you do have to figure out like what fuels that determination to make that extra effort versus like just hitting that delete button. And for me, oftentimes, for some people, it's like just spending quality time with their family gives them just a whole next push of energy. It may be as simple as good nutrition. It may be as simple in my case when I'm when I'm kind of a little bit in a lull, I tend to go to music. I love music. Music for me is almost the closest thing to religion, and I do a lot of my work to some of my favorite music, and that gives me kind of another spring in the step. So, but you do have to kind of figure out what is that fuel for me that actually makes you choose to make that effort.
Makes a lot of sense. And moving on to like another subject around, and we have spoken a lot about leadership, and something I'm taking away, and maybe, as I pose this question, maybe I'll phrase it in a way where, based on our conversation so far, I've seen that you are flexible and learning continuously to change leadership principles and styles, right? Like as you go from that BP to McKinsey, McKinsey to BP to, keep moving up. Can you describe like the evolution of like the core principles of leadership for you, right? Like how do you approach leadership over the years? And I'm guessing you're still learning and growing, right? Like you seem like a lifelong learner. What are those core principles by which you and maybe some success stories around that?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, in most professions or in most organizations I think of our listeners here, whether it's small companies, like yours, or whether it's gigantic companies like Amazon or FedEx, you tend to, over time, and that certainly was the case for me. At BP in London, I was the one rolling up my sleeves and doing analysis, kind of how, like, what's the cost return of upgrading the looks of certain BP retail gas stations globally. That was an individual job. And leadership there was basically me making sure that I just did a good job providing solid work in support of the team. Then when I went with BP to Cleveland, well, there was team leadership involved, where like you need to start figuring out not just how do I do my job extremely well on a consistent basis. As I said before, how do I add value to other people's jobs? And so this is where, the whole notion of middle management gets a lot of skepticism, right? Who are all these people in between, and do we need all these people in between, right? And so for me, that notion of like, this is not a precision-powered thing. This is actually one where, like, I need to figure out how I make it lighter, not heavier, for those people that I'm supposed to be leading and supporting. And that's also, I think this is something I learned also along the way. There's no entitlement here. When you looked at my Forward Air, like business card, or when you got an email from me, at the bottom it said Tom Schmitt, team and customer support. Because that's my job, right? So it was team and customer support. And then when you remind yourself that, okay, do I actually spend my time that way? When I got to co-author Simple Solutions, I was a big fan of time cards, not because I was trying to control whether you worked your 8 hours today. I just wanted to get a sense if these were our business objectives as a division or as a operating company. Did we collectively spend the mind share and energy somewhere in sync between the objectives and the way we spend our time? As an example, if I want to, as I said before, double the Canadian business, but then I look at my own and I look at the core leadership team's time cards, and we spent 1.5% of our aggregate time on Canadian business, well, the odds of us achieving doubling that business is not going to happen, right? It's not going to be very high odds. So, but yeah, leadership changed certainly from individually just nailing my job to figuring out how to make things lighter for the people that actually are relying on me. And that obviously progressed. But this notion of team sport for me became more and more important. When people get individual honors, that's all. And obviously this is being said a lot of times, but it's so true. It's all about team sport. I spent a lot of time, and this is perhaps also where I refined some of that leadership principle. When you look at your objectives as a division, as a department, as a soccer club, whatever the organizational unit is, you tend to have a team that's in charge of making that happen. It could be the coach, the assistant coaches, and the players in the different positions. I always use the so-called will skill matrix. So if I had a specific objective as a company, I want to double the Canadian business. And then who am I putting in charge of that? Okay. And then I put this person into a will skill matrix. How willing is this leader that I'm putting in charge of that task to actually do that? Or it's somebody who doesn't have a passport or who lives somewhere in the US and has no intention of ever going to Canada. Well, that's not going to work. So he's not very willing to do it, or he's not, and then, does he have any kind of growth expansion expertise or so? No, he does not. Well, you put these people on these like quadrants of that will skill matrix. If they are highly willing and highly skilled, I just need to cheerlead. I need to support them. Just make everything happen that they feel like empowered. If they are highly willing, but they're not super skilled in relation to that task, well, what do? I roll up my sleeves and I do a lot of coaching, training, feedback, right? Working with it so that the skill level goes up. If the person is highly skilled but not necessarily willing because they've done it 7 times before, then it's one of those like Ronald Reagan kind of one more for the Gipper type thing, right? Just like somehow get them to do it one more time. And then if I put somebody in charge of an important objective where he or she is low will and low skill, that's simply leadership failure. I just royally screwed up because and frankly, I probably screwed up that person because that person's career will be damaged because they're supposed to do something that they're not qualified to do will-wise or skill-wise. I screwed up the organization. So this is actually not that person's fault. It's actually my fault. This is leadership failure because I put somebody in charge of an important objective that they were neither willing nor skilled to do very well. So, but it's these types of things where the more you actually get to lead teams, the more, I think in my leadership aspiration, I get a bit more kind of germ analytical nerdy about like how these things actually fit together, including putting those leaders into that will skill matrix in relation to the thing I'm asking them to do.
While you're saying this, I'm going back to a Thomism that I just read in the picture that you had sent. Clarity of articulation represents clarity of thinking. What you just described, I think, as you move up the ladder as leaders, you observe these things, but the ability to think about it, stop yourself from doing that mistake, because most of the things you described are things we have fallen into, things we have done. I have been responsible for low skill, low will people in a task, and then that's a failure on me. But if I do it again and not think about it, I think there is a challenge. And it's also iterating this, right? Like, so having the clarity of thinking and putting it into that articulation of being able to create a simple graphic diagram that explains that thought process, I think it goes such a long way. And thank you so much for actually, because every time you're saying something, like my head's like spinning, like thinking of all of these things I've done in my life. But while we talk about that, like one last thing on leadership that I do want to touch, while, there is also the other side, which is the resilience in leadership, right? Like the good times are there. Let's grow the business. Yeah, you got some revenue challenges. We have to, but like when it comes to like the big things that you encounter, and I think one of the things I do want to bring about is the Omni Logistics situation that ended up happening at Forward Air under your tenure. And you also had, if I'm not mistaken, a cyber attack back in 2020. Yes. I mean, and I know the leadership that was in play over there at that time from an IT standpoint used to be my boss, one of the best technical leaders, Jay Tomasello, that's out there, right? And I know how much he focuses on cybersecurity, right? Like, so those two things, we would, and again, I'm sure there are more, but it would be, we wouldn't do justice to the part if we weren't to bring up the Omni challenges with, the issues that you faced over there, and maybe describe what happened and it's solved now.
Yeah. So, because I don't expect all of our listeners to be in detail students of the Forward Air past 5 years. But let me point out, that the two pieces that you mentioned. Let me go back to 2020. We actually, I kind of half jokingly, half seriously say, like, we had the 3 C's, the letter C in 2020. So it started with something that we all had to wrestle with COVID, once in a lifetime experience. And at the beginning, we all didn't know kind of how scary and how bad this will be. And it certainly, it caused a lot of changes. It caused a lot of lessons learned. In our specific case, Forward Air, if you think about it, compare it to some of the e-commerce focused, like parcel businesses like FedEx or UPS or Amazon. After the initial scare, for them, it was almost like every single day was like Christmas and Easter the same day, and honey was flowing off the tree because, everybody bought the second and third refrigerator, and like it was beautiful, right? So for Forward Air, this thing was super scary. Personally, it was scary for all of us, but also we had a lot of live events business. Well, how many concerts did you go to in the last 9 months of 2020? 0. We had a lot of retail distribution business to malls. Well, those were closed. We actually furloughed 2,500 people. Furloughed, like took their job temporarily away. And but we got through that. We operated as a team. We got through that. We had very clear, this gets to the clarity of articulation. The first thing we had to do is we called it 0+ volume. We have to get fastest possible way back to the volumes we had the year before, or better, 0+. And by July, we had the same volumes back, and we brought these people back into their jobs. And then we had a march for margins, because some of the business that we actually got on in replacing the events business wasn't the same quality of business. Yeah. So we had to then upgrade the business over time. Once we had enough volume, we had a march for margins. So there was a lot of clarity of articulation, and the entire organization knew this is about getting volumes back so that people get their jobs back. This is about the march for margins as the next step. And but COVID was the first C. The second C was at the end of the year was a cyber attack. We literally, for 2 weeks, pretty much were dark. And this is where muscle memory helps, where we just divide the terminals into kind of 4 or 6 specific parts, and people use their phones, and then dispatch was happening that way, communication with the customer was happening that way, and every single day we had okay, so how do we pay these people? Because we have no records. Well, let's pay them the same thing we did last week. It's going to be close enough, and at some point we're going to fix it. But it was scary, but this is also where people service profit comes in. What I learned at FedEx and what we applied also at a great culture like Forward Air, we had so much reputation capital and relationship capital with our suppliers and our customers. They all stuck with us. Not a single customer walked away from us because they didn't want to do business with us anymore. But that cyber attack was super scary too. And then when you get to the decision, do we pay these criminals or do we basically just plow through it? There's a lot of those decisions that we had to be making. And in between the COVID C and the cyber attack C, we had this one's a bit cheating, the activist C. So I'm using the second letter C just to make it 3 C's. We had once our stock went into the basement based on all of the events business going away. An activist shareholder bought shares in the company and then tried to tell us what to do. And this is also where we learned lessons about let's play offense, not defense. We're going to listen to them. We have no monopoly to wisdom. Best idea wins. Let's play some mental ping pong. I told these guys these 7 things make complete sense. We're all over them. And if you are almost like medicine to us, you make us do good things faster, so be it. And we oftentimes, as a company, say we want to be our own activist before an activist shows up. And we had the fortune or joy that we had one show up, but we played offense with them. Best idea wins. Every single time they called me, I picked up the phone. And this is also where you learn that your advisor's agenda and yours is overlapping, but it's not the same. Because they oftentimes tell you, be very cautious, do not do this, do not do that. But with activists, you win when you engage with them and when you literally believe, we're going to listen because we want the same thing. We want this company to be as successful as it possibly can be the fastest possible way. So let's play team sport here together. And then to your second point, Ninat, the more recent challenge. So we got through 2020 swimmingly by The end of 21, our stock price was at 124, and the low at the COVID time was 39. So we made our way back up there as a team. And by the way, we had leadership imperatives as a company. We built those in 2019, and they served us so well. We always said we operate as one. There's no finger pointing during a cyber attack, like which idiot let these people into our systems. Like none of that happened. Yes, we did the lessons learned, and we made sure that we got more secure. Jay Tomasello and his team did a tremendous job doing that. But we used our leadership imperatives. We looked beyond our four walls. We worked with suppliers and customers together. The more recent challenge that you mentioned is the acquisition of Omni Logistics. So, and this is one of those where I'm absolutely confident that, and again, I don't have perfect foresight. I have certainly no monopoly to wisdom, but as a company, Forward Air in its less than truckload business historically sold almost exclusively to forwarders who then positioned this offering to the actual shipper of the product.
Right.
And for us, that runway, and by the way, these partnerships were tremendous and are still tremendous, and they are the lifeblood of Forward Air, and they always will be. But we did get to a point where they started also in some cases insourcing and building up their own mini Forward Airs.
Of course.
And this is you're almost a little bit like the frog in the boiling pot. It feels super comfy and cozy. You got great relationships, but at some point it stops feeling cozy, and it gets too warm. So, but those relationships are terrific. They will be necessary going forward. They're the lifeblood of Forward Air. That's how the company was built. Omni Logistics was a move that gave Forward Air, in my mind, decades of additional runway by doing an and, not an or. Yes, we are going to be the best possible partners to the forwarding community, and where there's no forwarders involved, we're also going to sell to shippers directly. So I'm at this point no longer kind of speaking on behalf of the company. I'm a huge cheerleader. I'm a huge supporter. I'm a significant shareholder. But this acquisition got a lot of reaction about this move makes sense, but the price may or may not have been right, and you should have engaged shareholders. These are very fair points. Both CEOs, the Omni CEO and I, are no longer on the team, but I'm the biggest cheerleader, the biggest supporter, and I do believe the company now has a ton of runway. And in terms of a so-called, we always talk about a TAM, an addressable market. That total addressable market is just bigger now. And it's an and, not an or. It's being the best partner to the forwarding community and selling to shippers directly where there's no forwarders involved.
And may I ask you, Tomism on that front, leave a place better than you found it. Would you describe it that way?
Well, I mean, this is one of those, Ninat, where I always have the aspiration to tell myself at the end of the day, and this is where I said, like, we don't want to wait until our funeral for someone to recognize that we did leave a place better than we found it. I'm not going to judge myself. This is not my prerogative. What I am judging myself by, did I do what I intended to do, and did I do it the best way possible? When I started working at Forward Air, I told all the teammates that you will get an email from me every single Saturday. And they're like, yeah, sure enough, like new guy coming in, he's going to write something the first Saturday, probably the second Saturday, and then he forgets because he's got other stuff going on. No, well, for 5.5 years, I wrote an email every single Saturday. There was the occasional end of year double issue where I said, I'm going to take a break next week. And this is like the Sports Illustrated double issue. Like you get one this week, you won't get one next week. But I wrote one every single Saturday, and I told them in the very first one, what you should expect is good intentions. There's no place for, it's a word I can't use on this podcast. It starts with an A. In a company, we want people who are well intended. And I told people in my first Saturday email, you should always expect from me two things: good intentions and some level of competence. You certainly should not expect perfection. And that's where I do believe, Forward Air has a tremendous runway. It's the company that has the best LTL service in the industry. That's externally validated, best on time, lowest damages, highest speed on the large lanes. And now it's got a huge runway in terms of addressable market. So I think the jury will have to decide over the next several years, but I couldn't be a bigger supporter and cheerleader for this team.
Yeah, I believe that. And that's amazing. Thank you, Tom, for actually giving that perspective. Yeah.
And Tom, it is, it's amazing to actually look at the clock and see how long we've been talking, because it feels like 9 minutes, but it's been much longer than that. But amazing content, and I truly feel a masterclass in leadership and philosophy and principles. But before we sign off here, I'd love for you to share with the audience. We have a lot of listeners that are maybe new to the logistics space, new to leadership, starting a company, entrepreneurs. And if you could give advice to that next generation of logistics leaders, what would that be?
Yeah. So, first of all, there's technical parts, and then there's kind of more leadership and mentality and mindset, right? So let me perhaps a couple of quick thoughts on both fronts.
Please.
The technical one. So I always thought about supply chain moves in terms of, I call them three currencies. One is cost, right? When you import something from Asia or move it across North America, everybody always looks at cost. The second thing is obviously service levels, like what type of window, what type of speed do you need? And then the third one, increasingly more important, was carbon footprint. Like what we're doing here, what does this do to our society? What does this do to mankind over years and over decades? And so obviously you always try to hit that sweet spot of the best service at the lowest cost, and making sure that you're also responsible towards all the communities that we live in and work in from a carbon footprint perspective. Then you have geopolitics happening, right? There's mistrust between regions of the world increasing. Yeah. Like people talk about China perhaps differently today than in some cases than they did 5 or 10 years ago. Same in some cases with Russia. So then that sweet spot between service, cost, and carbon footprint gets impacted by how people think about geopolitics, how they think about, do we want more imports from China? Do we want less imports from China? Do we want less dependability on China? And then the second thing is obviously it's not just geopolitics. It's also if one of those three currencies becomes more and more important, like climate change, carbon footprint. So then that sweet spot that may have been, we need all these imports initially from coastal China, then inland China, then from other Asian communities and countries. But now with that sweet spot, because of geopolitical tension and because of increasing importance of carbon footprint becoming more and more driven by climate change compared to the way it was 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, that's when you have nearshoring. That's when you have manufacturing come back more to America or more to the south of the U.S. border, right? So that sweet spot is not static. That sweet spot between cost, service, and carbon footprint moves based on relevance of these pieces and based on geopolitical influences. So that's and I think when people work, like our listeners, they work for large organizations and they think through that, like for regional manufacturing versus global manufacturing, do you manufacture the same product one time in one place and then you do a lot of distribution globally, or do you do it 5 times in 5 economic centers and you have smaller distribution? All these decisions get impacted by how the sweet spot of these three currencies actually is moving over time. Content-wise, you asked then about almost like I have no monopoly to wisdom, and I don't never would. So I should always be humble about I look at this more about mental ping pong. I listen to the two of you and I pick up something, I learn something, and hopefully some people pick up also something when I share some scars or some lessons learned in a positive way. There's perhaps 2 things that would come to mind. The first one is, and this is actually a Thomism too, which I said here, let's be the director and lead actor in our own movie. Mm-hmm. And this is where, if you think about like some of the things I tried to do, right? Making my journey to America, speaking up with a gentleman at BP and Hugh Hanna and say like, you take me with you. So you always have a choice, in life every single day. You can actually, and I'm a big movie fan too. I said I'm a music fan. I'm also a big movie fan. So I can choose option one, which is I buy a big bag of popcorn. I go into the movie theater. I sit down. I eat my popcorn. I watch the movie and I keep my fingers crossed and hope for a happy ending. I could use that as an approach to life. Or I can say, actually, when it comes to my personal life, when it comes to my career, I could actually here to stick with the analogy, I could be the scriptwriter, the director, the lead actor of my own movie. And I don't have to keep my fingers crossed and close my eyes sometimes and hope for a happy ending because I'm running the show. I'm actually the one writing the script. I'm the one who actually directs it. And I'm also being a lead actor in the movie. And I think you have to just choose which of these mentalities you pick up, whether you are eating the popcorn and just hope this thing somehow ends in a good way, or whether you're the one putting yourself in charge. The last thing, and then I'm going to really be quiet. There was one important piece, and I think it goes back to the theory behind the book that I was lucky to co-author. So I was born and raised in southern Germany, and Germans have perhaps the reputation of being somewhat nerdy, analytical, left brain, like the engineering type people, right? I mean, lots of engineering companies from Germany. And all of us are naturally home more in one half of our brain. The left brain gets typically labeled with like, that's your analytical side. The right side of your brain is the more passionate, emotional side. And so the one thing that when I was in Memphis, and I said in those 12 years, I got very engaged in the community. The one thing I picked up that we haven't talked about yet is I got engaged with many of the community leaders, including the lady Dorothy Pugh, who founded the ballet in Memphis. Oh, yeah. And I got engaged with them through another person who's the chairperson of that ballet, Leanne Cox. And I never had seen a ballet before. But then I figured out, like, they actually do more than just Swan Lake. They actually impact thousands of people's lives, like kids' ballet, like the teachers to discipline, Pilates classes. And so I got in more and more into the community. But what I personally picked up is engaging with those types of leaders that are like just living those passionate causes, like founding a ballet. They may be at home much more on the right-hand side of their brain, like more passion, emotions, and this is where I felt like this is actually pretty cool. If I can be self-aware enough to figure out I'm more of a left brain analytical nerd, but I can surround myself more with people and causes, food banks with Purolator in Canada, the ballet in Memphis, that actually touch more on your passion and emotional side, the right-hand side of the brain. And that was the essence of my book. We're all at home in one of the two, naturally, but if we figure out a way to activate the one we're at home and the other half too, chances are we're going to have more fun and a better time, and we're going to have more impact. And so I think I'm very grateful to Dorothy for kind of opening up that other half of my brain and kind of make me to some extent a little bit more complete that way.
That is, that again, clarity of articulation, right? Like that entire concept. And I think if you can embody that into, not only you yourself as a leader, but organizationally, if you can articulate that to people, be engaged in passionate causes, while we all do. And again, all sorts of jobs, but there is a analytical side, but where do you find your passion? And you go look for that right brain passion by surrounding yourself with these really passionate people, right? How do you turn logistics into a passion? You got to see someone that's got passion for an art, right? It's actually beautifully said. Thank you.
So Tom, I want to give you the opportunity obviously, we highly recommend everyone checks out the book, Simple Solutions. We'll put some links in the show notes. But where would you recommend the audience goes to maybe learn more about you? Are there social networks that you spend more time on? Is LinkedIn the best place? I just want to let the audience have a takeaway of where they could go to learn more about you and what you've done.
Yeah, so thank you, Dan, for asking. LinkedIn is a perfect place. I go there obviously every single day, and a lot of contacts and people that I got to respect and work with a lot. We find each other and found each other over LinkedIn. So Tom Schmitt, former chairman and CEO forward there, is my LinkedIn address, 2 T's at the end, no D, my last name. And then actually one of my former FedEx colleague, a communication specialist who I've had the privilege of working with for a long time, Becky Babineau, she helped me with a website that we actually started together when I got to co-author Simple Solutions. And the website is called www.simplyschmitt.com. And it actually she always kept this thing up to date. So it has publications, things that I was engaged in. And yes, it has a bio and a resume, I guess, too. But so this is, if somebody is nerdy enough or curious enough also to want to find out more, certainly that's a rich source also.
That's beautiful.
Amazing.
And Tom, one thing I could tell you, we'll be observing what you do next. I'm sure, as your journey progresses, I'm pretty sure it's not done yet. We are keeping a close eye.
Thank you. And I'm not done yet. So definitely to be continued.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Tom.
Dan, thank you for making this an engaging conversation. And thank you also for listening to me.
Hi, I'm Ninad Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Fulfillment IQ. And I'm here with
Dan Call, CRO and partner at Fulfillment IQ. We're the team behind the Ecom Logistics podcast. Our mission is to provide you with genuine insights from our work alongside logistics leaders to help you improve your supply chain.
In the Ecom Logistics podcast, we share the knowledge and the insights we've gained from working alongside amazing brands, retailers, 3PLs, and VCs, so you can make the most out of your supply chain journey.
If you like what you're hearing, we'd truly appreciate your support with a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting channel. Your feedback not only keeps us going, but also helps others find the podcast. If you think Fulfillment IQ can assist you, or if you have an idea related to logistics, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always up for a chat and ready to explore new possibilities together.
Stay tuned to the Ecom Logistics podcast on your favorite podcast platform for fresh and practical insights into e-commerce and logistics. Until next time, let's keep making a difference in logistics together.